Welcome. I'm Sister Maria Simperman, religious of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and on the faculty here in theological ethics, and also the founding director of the Center for the Study of Consecrated Life. So I want to welcome you and thank you for being with us this evening. I will offer you two introductions from two different people, and the first one is Colleen Kennedy. She's our Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Catholic Theological Union. So she offers the first welcome. Colleen?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us from a snowy Hyde Park, Chicago. I hope it's warm wherever you are. It's wonderful to see all of the different communities represented here tonight. As Maria said, I am Colleen Kennedy, Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at CTU. And for over 50 years, CTU has prepared men and women, religious and lay, for ministry in our church and in our hurting world. Throughout that half century, in this important formation of ministers, CTU has all along been attentive to interculturality, peacemaking, and reconciliation. And tonight's program is an important moment for us as we humbly offer a platform for the ongoing discussion around right relationships and anti-racism. We greatly value the partnership with Sister Gail Lawanga, Sister Anita Baird, Sister Josita Colbert, and all of the National Black Sisters Conference in continuing this conversation around the role of religious life in addressing and dismantling racial injustice. I want to especially thank Sister Addie Lorraine Walker for leading us tonight. And of course, Sister Maria Simperman, I thank her for her work as the director of the Center for the Study of Consecrated Life here at CTU. She's a wonderful colleague. Lastly, I'd like to give thanks on behalf of CTU for the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation and their extraordinary support of our programming through the Catholic Sisters Initiative. It's our hope that you will gain something this evening, learn something, and appreciate the exchange. And I ask you too to support our mission and make more programs like this possible, or perhaps consider auditing a course at CTU. This evening's program will be recorded and will be available at Learn at CTU later this week. On our website, I invite you to sign up to receive our weekly scripture reflections written by our world-renowned faculty like Sister Maria, and also to receive information about CTU's myriad events, courses, and resources. I thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Colleen. I also want to do a little shout out to Colleen. Yesterday was her 5-year anniversary at CTU. So it's delightful to be part of this learning community with you as well and as colleagues. I would also now like to invite Sister Gail Lawanga, Good Shepherd sister, to offer a word of welcome on behalf of the Black Catholic Sisters Conference. Sister Gail.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Colleen. The National Black Sisters Conference was established in 1968. It is an inclusive organization of Black Catholic religious women and associates from various congregations across the United States. And we have to say that we have been very pleased to participate in these sessions with CTU. And on behalf of the National Black Sisters Conference, I say welcome.
Thank you, Sister Gail. Sister Gail, Sister Josita, and Sister Anita are part of what I call the planning community for these sessions. It's more than a committee. It really is building relationships and community. So echoing Colleen, it's such a gift to collaborate, to co-sponsor these really important conversations that we hope and pray and urge will lead us to the transformative action of God's reign that's just so needed in our world today, ever more deeply and fully. So I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful to the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation and the Catholic Sisters Initiative for sponsoring these opportunities. So it really takes the globe to do so much. So thank you, all of you. I hope many of you were able to be with us last week for the first session. It was profound. Our hope in the second series was to deepen the conversation. And I really do believe it did. And many of you wrote the same. If you haven't had a chance, or if you had to pause after one session, please go back to the video and watch it to the very last seconds. There's wisdom in every moment, so encourage you to. The other piece that I also will ask you, beg of you, is to, after Sister Addie Lorraine Walker speaks, to stay for the conversation that follows. It's not enough anymore to just soak in information, though we must do that. We must soak in as much learning as we can. What this time is asking of us is also to allow the Spirit to transform us, and that comes from the conversations as well. So please, I urge you, none of us, not many, I haven't met many people who would say, I'm great at difficult conversations. I don't find them easy either. But what I've come to realize is they're not difficult conversations. They're actually holy conversations. They're sacred pathways to what we're being called to. And so by being in conversation with people across congregations, across life commitments, we learn from one another and hear what the Spirit is speaking. So again, I ask you to stay to the end for the conversation and then the Q&A afterwards. So without further ado, oh, there is one more ado briefly. Has been our practice here at CTU with the Center for the Study of Consecrated Life. We acknowledge, we're so aware of so many places and areas of injustice that we begin by acknowledging the First Nations peoples, the Aboriginal peoples, the Native American peoples, the Indigenous peoples. And here where I sit in Chicago, among the many groups are the tribes of the Illinois, Miami, and Potawatomi peoples. And we thank them for their care of the water and the land so that we could be here. And we pray we may care for the water, the land, so that generations upon generations may as well. I also want to acknowledge a Haitian descendant, Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, who was the first, the founder of Chicago. And these are stories and histories, and her stories, March being Women's Month, that we need to make more known. And so grateful for his work. And we beseech Sister Thea Bowman, FSPA, for all of these efforts that we are engaging in. So thank you. And now I ask Sister Gail to do an introduction to our speaker this evening.
It is my privilege to introduce Sister Addie Lorraine Walker. She is a school sister of Notre Dame. She's also a longtime member of National Black Sisters Conference, and she currently serves on our board. Sister Addie has a doctorate in practical theology from Boston College. She served as province leader of the School Sisters of Notre Dame from 2002 to 2011. Sister is a sought-after speaker, facilitator, and teacher. Presently, she is director of the Sankofa Institute for African American Pastoral Leadership at Oblate School of Theology in San Antonio, Texas. It is with great pleasure that I give you Sister Addie Lorraine Walker.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. I am really very excited to participate in this conversation, I want to call it, a conversation about transformative love. And tonight, this conversation continues in that I will continue with stories of race and place and grace. So it's stories that bring us into our present but hopefully cause us to reflect that and help us propel ourselves into the future. But I would like to begin with really a song prayer that calls us to the freedom of the children of God, to the freedom that we find in Jesus. And that those of us who believe in freedom, if we believe in freedom, we can't rest. And that's why we're having these loving conversations. And so if you would join me in prayer and song, that we who believe in freedom, we will not rest until it's done.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mother sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Sing it with me if you like it. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. 'Cause to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light, I say, carry us through the gales. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Then struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. How about no man's word? We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it's done. And part of that cannot rest is that we need to begin to together dismantle the system that has us in check, really. And so I called tonight, do you hear what I hear? And I really want to focus tonight on the fact that I'm a vowed religious woman, and central to that for me as a school sister of Notre Dame is the vow of obedience. But what is that exactly? Exactly, that means that I am a listener. I'm listening deeply and carefully to my own heart, to the heart of the people of God, to you who speak to me daily and in various ways. I'm listening to the news. I'm listening to the gospel. I'm listening to the word of God coming in the wind and the rain and the frozen weather that we had not too long ago here in Texas. I'm listening, because all of it is a part of how we discern God's will and God's timing and God's love and God's action that must come through me and you and all of us together. So I'm listening, and I'm inviting you to listen, but I'm inviting you even to check into what is it that you are hearing. Do you hear what I hear? Do you hear what I hear? I've entitled this, Do You Hear What I Hear? But it just as easily could be, do you see what I see? Or do you know what I know? Or do you understand what I understand about life, about love, about faith, about God? I'm 71, and I have come to know and believe that the answer to most of these questions, when I ask my white friends, my white sisters, my white colleagues at Oblate, the answer is no. You don't even see me. I mean, see me. And you don't hear what I hear. And you don't understand what I understand about life. When I was in junior high, I remember watching the civil rights marches on TV, the sit-ins, the fire hoses with a strong force of water knocking people down, women and children and men, all falling to the ground. I remember the dogs. I remember the white police beating the people with clubs. I was fixed on the screen. I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, I must do something. What's wrong with these people? They must not know who we are. They must not know me. If they could meet me, they would change. Now, I know you know that sounds a little bit foolish, but I was slightly grandiose in my younger years. I've mellowed now. Ask my friends. I have to do something, because we are the people that Jesus prayed for, that all may be one. That's us. They just haven't met me yet. And so I decided at that point, I made up my mind that I was going to do my part in healing the families, the people. I was going to meet every kind of people I could meet. Black people, white people, Hispanic people, Native people. I was going to help heal the world. I was in junior high. From that fateful day, I did begin to work in little ways and big ways and interrupt people who were not being nice, in my estimation, to each other, to try to understand their lives, their language, their faith, their God. At home in Austin, Texas, East Side, the Black part of town, with a good mix of Mexicans, I learned how to live Black and survive in the world. I learned to speak Spanish. I learned to be with Catholics. I was Methodist at the time, but I learned how to be with Catholics. I liked Catholics. They had a lot of good symbols, smoke and bells. I liked them. And also the Black Catholic Church And the Mexican American Catholic Church were blocks from each other. And so it was an easy journey between the two. I had friends at both places. And then because I could speak Spanish, I was comfortable in both environments. Education, faith, and family were the highest values in my family. And not only my family, my immediate family, but my whole neighborhood. We took care of one another. The whole community was like one family, one church. There were other churches in our community, but we treated them all the same. We all went to everybody's service. And I know at the Catholic Church, they said, you're not supposed to go to those other churches, but they didn't understand this was my family. So we went to, we sang in everybody's choirs, at the Holiness Church, at the Grants Chapel AME Church, at the Simpson Methodist Church, at the Holy Cross Catholic Church, and Our Lady of Guadalupe Catholic Church. So we just made the circuit, and we went and supported our friends and our family. We were one. No one went hungry. No one went without their homework. We were one. So we were raised to be fully functioning in the community. My mother was a block captain for the Democratic Party, I guess. And so we all, with our little kids, of 19 of us, were trucking right behind her, really. Oh, we couldn't even read the papers, but giving them to all the people so that they could understand what's going on in the community and how to make our community better. Our formal school education was augmented with the help of Black teachers. We were in a segregated community. So with Black teachers, we learned Black history and Black culture. We had heroes and sheroes. We learned religion. We learned a little theology and spirituality, and the arts and music and dance. We had drama, performances in the street and at school and at church. The church was the center. We had classes at church and special Black clubs that taught us things, the arts, the quilting and the tapestry and the painting and the making of baskets. I learned how to read place and space. I learned how to read if this place was safe, if there was a place to be trusted. Could I trust? I learned about truth, listening always for the double entendre, the double message, listening for danger or evil or hostility or lies. I learned to negotiate white spaces, to fit in or at least not get kicked out or killed. I learned to talk in ways, white spaces that were acceptable, so I could be acceptable in the white space. And it made me at least able to be understood, tolerated, and sometimes, more often than not, accepted. I was a 1960s version of pre-civil rights Black life, and then civil rights demonstrations and unrest, survival Black life. And I was also clear evidence of less survived integration and the demise of the tight-knit Black community I grew up in, Black life. Depending on how you read the tea leaves, I had survived and lived successfully in the various environs I found myself until I entered religious life. I remembered writing in my journal at that time when I entered the School Sisters of Notre Dame in Dallas, Texas. I wrote, my social location has shifted. I'm off balance. I used to deal with white people all day long. I was a research chemist, a very successful one, a research chemist. But then I could go home to my own space and be my Black self and recharge and go at it again tomorrow. This was no longer possible. I lived with them 24/7. I was disoriented, to say the least. The food was different, or at least prepared differently and eaten differently. Do you know I ate a banana with a knife and a fork? They laughed about different things and talked about different things. They prayed differently. In fact, they prayed from books all the time or papers and rarely just prayed. In fact, I was so curious because they would say things like, let us pray for the poor. And I was waiting for the prayer. The prayer never came. They just said, we pray to the Lord. And they say, Lord, hear our prayer. I said, well, then I went to the postulant director. I asked her, when exactly are we gonna pray for these people we announce every day? And she says, oh, you're supposed to be, mentally praying for them. And that's why we say, let us pray to them. I said, oh, well, wouldn't it be good if we just prayed for these people? I was disoriented. Though they were from different backgrounds, these white sisters I lived with, they were from different backgrounds from each other. They were white and more alike than I was like them. They talked about Black people in the news or that they had heard about, as if I was not in the room. Their commentary and ignorance were unchallenged by me, at least initially. I found ways to bit by bit offer a different commentary or alternative framework or words to describe Black people when they were describing them as angry Black men, or she's nothing but an angry Black woman, or they would say the poor, as if they were nameless. Dangerous, to be feared. Wow, we can't be living in a bad neighborhood, or excerpts of their race. Or as said of the Hispanic people, if they are going to be in our country, they should learn to speak English. My feedback was not necessarily welcomed. However, as I could, I would say different little things or remain silent so I could fit in. I wanted to be a school sister. The white sisters didn't see me. They didn't hear me. They didn't hear what I heard when they spoke either. My transition into a white religious formation program was an awakening to living within the coded language system of white supremacy that constantly needed translation on my part. And it became very clear that my reality, my culture, my language, what I see and what I hear, they did not understand or even make an effort to understand. I was there to become a school sister of Notre Dame. What I have come to realize is that we don't really hear the same thing either. So even if they heard it, it would not have been the same thing that I was hearing. Even experiencing the same reality, our socialization, our backgrounds, the way we were raised, our reality shaped and informed how we heard or how we could hear, what we hear, and how we stand in relationship to that reality within which we lived, especially understanding racism. What do I mean by living within a coded language system of white supremacy? I didn't have language for it before now. So I'm thankful to Robin DiAngelo in White Fragility. I now have some language to wrap around my experience. I walked into a world where white people carried the code of unexamined beliefs that prop up their racial responses. They believed only bad people were racist. So if I talked about racist or racism, what they saw was a Ku Klux Klan person, a bad person, a terrorist, or that. What I saw was denial of access to resources, to education, to housing, to jobs. I saw denial of my people, my family, my community. They saw I'm a nice person. So our socialization had influenced, impacted our ability to respond to this situation. So I entered into this kind of coded language of unexamined beliefs. They believed that individualism allowed white people to exempt themselves from the forces of socialization, meaning they were taught to think about racism only as discrete acts committed by individual persons rather than a complex, interconnected system. White people, even some white sisters, see themselves as entitled to and deserving of more than what people of color deserve. DiAngelo states, I saw our investment in a system that serves us. I also saw how hard we worked to deny all this and how defensive we became when these dynamics were named. I saw how our defensiveness maintained the racial status quo. I came to see that the way we are taught to define racism makes it virtually impossible for white people to understand it. Given our racial insulation, coupled with misinformation, any suggestion that we are complicit in racism is a kind of unwelcome and insulting shock to the system. I walked into this system. I walked into this system where the participants, the white sisters, were literally blinded to their actions and reactions to racism. They knew little or nothing about me or my culture or background. I walked in very conscious of my own background and my own culture, and I missed it terribly. But I walked in with very strong survival skills. I walked in ready with very strong coping skills. I was going to survive. God had called me and I wasn't leaving till God called me to leave. And so I must apologize to all those school sisters who had to endure me. So hopefully we have made amends by now. I was clear about what racism was. I was clear. And that it existed everywhere in America. And there wasn't a place that I could go and not have it. So this place, School Sisters of Notre Dame, was as good as any place to live out God's call. So I understood, as I understood it. So in a real sense, we were destined to collide. Perhaps it started with questions like, where are you from? When I answered Texas, the follow-up question is, before that, before Texas. I said, before Texas? From God. They said, no, where in Africa? I said, oh, actually, I've never been to Africa. I don't know anyone from Africa. I'm from Texas. Well, where are your parents from? Texas. And then a further comment is, well, I guess that's okay. I don't see color anyway. I just see people. Okay. My parents always taught me to treat everyone equally. We were taught to judge people by what they do, not who they are. And I would stand there and ask myself, do you hear what you're saying? Do you hear what I'm hearing? Can you hear yourself? Remarks like these make it hard to begin a conversation about racism. What is racism, you ask? Racism is that system that results when one racial group's prejudices uses power, authority, institutions, policies, and practices to exclude and deny access to resources to another group or other groups unlike themselves. Therefore, it is not just about one's individual acts. It is the collection of silent codes, behaviors, and strategies that make sure that not too many people that look like me make it through the system. Perhaps there is a silent quota system. I don't know that for sure. And silence is a great guardian for keeping the system in place. Several sisters came to me during one of our province workshops on racism and said to me, Addie, do you think I'm a racist? I can't be. I'm nice to you, aren't I? We can't be racist. We let you in, didn't we? We let you participate in everything. We even sing some of your songs sometimes. And I would ask myself mostly, do you hear what I hear? Do you hear what you're saying? And surely the answer was no. At other times, sisters have come to me to compliment me, I think, in an effort to help my belonging or my sense of belonging with words like, Addie, you are such a credit to your race. You are unlike some other poor Black people over there on the east side, west side, or whatever city I was in, not knowing that my family is the poor Black family in Austin, right? Do you hear what you're saying? Do you hear what you're saying to me? You are so articulate, Addie. You are so articulate. You should be proud. You should be proud of your culture. At least you have a culture. We don't have a culture. We're just Americans. Once when I was in one of our leadership meetings in Mississippi, our eager new communications director and marketing specialist stood to make a special presentation to us to help us get our name known or be more consistent in how we put out our logo, etc. She said, stood up in her eagerness and said, I'm here today to talk to you about branding. My eyes glazed over. I asked myself, did she say branding? Does she know we are sitting here in the backwoods of Mississippi? And she's gonna be talking to me about branding? Black people have been branded in Mississippi for hundreds of years. And so I thought, well, let it go. I looked around and I asked myself, do you hear what I hear? Do y'all hear it? Nobody looked too funny. They just kept on taking notes and writing. Finally, after the third or fourth or fifth time she said about branding, I finally stood up and said, y'all, I'm done. I can't sit here in Mississippi, especially in the woods in Mississippi, and talk about branding. Today, I just can't do it. I don't really care about what new meaning you bring into the word. Right now, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I stood up and I walked out. Well, they did pause the meeting. They interrupted the meeting. But more than half the people had no idea what was wrong with me. And why? What was it I couldn't take? What was it I couldn't do anymore? What was it? And I asked, do you hear what I hear? Of course, I can go on with many other examples, but I won't, because I want us to kind of come together and talk about this, because it really happens in places and spaces, even when Black people are not there, maybe even more so, because you don't catch yourself or you don't catch your friends or family. One last example of encoded language. Several years ago, we decided to write one of our beautiful, I call them beautiful, directional statements, because they are beautiful. Very often they're artistic work, and you know what? We can paper our walls with them, because that's, anyway. Anyway, this particular document, in the document we refer to solidarity with the poor. Now, if you recall, the poor were the people I saw when I first entered. They all look like me. Okay, so we were going to have solidarity with the poor. I want to know, do you hear what I hear? And I thought, well, maybe, Addie, just maybe chill here, okay? Back up, because maybe we're going to invite some people in and have listening sessions with them. And we're going to make some statements together, and we're going to do some actions together. So I at first I got excited about the statement because I thought, we were going to do something about our lives together. So I thought, well, I thought it meant that we were going to meet and greet people, and whoever they had decided who the poor were, and we were going to make new decisions about our neighborhoods, about our schools, about our relationship to real life people, where we would talk together and pray together and eat together and understand and change our behavior together so that we could dismantle a system that kept people poor and isolated and uneducated with no access to resources. No, when I ask about it, they said, no, that's not what we mean when we say solidarity with the poor. We are going to make their concerns our own. And I said, well, how do we make the concerns of the poor our own without them being in the room? How do we do that? And they told me, well, we kind of know what they need. I said, oh, but we will be the voice for the voiceless. I said, what? You mean there's no withing? We're not going to be with somebody? Where is the withing? Solidarity with. Where is the withing? And those who you name as voiceless, actually, they have a voice. They just need access. They need a pathway to speak for themselves. Where is the withing? And when we come to deal with racism, where is the withing? And I often have white sisters and white people and friends come up to me and they say, well, Addie, what can I do? And maybe a few of them have moved to what can we do? And to most of my white friends, I want to say, like Ajioma Olua, I really don't want you to understand me better. I would like for you to understand the history of racism, and I would like for you to learn something about my culture, but that's not my main thing. I want you to understand yourselves better. I want you to understand you as a white person, as a white cultural group. Even though you think you don't have a group, you are a group. The way you act in time and space allows you to have access and privilege and resources that many of us do not have. I want you to understand how that can happen without you saying no. No. That is my sister. I want you to understand. Once we can understand, then we together can dismantle the system and grant access to everyone. To break the system, in systemic racism, it will take all of us. We must work together while we still have time. Do you hear what I hear? Do you hear the call? Do you hear the call? That all may be one. Let's get to work. Let's get to work. I have some questions for our breakout rooms this evening. I invite you to pause and take a moment and reflect on your own race and racism. I know race is a construct, but it's a construct that has had devastating impact and effect on people's lives. And racism is a system built even at the beginning, the foundation of this country. We can do something about it, but what has been your relationship to it? I have not spent a day without thinking about race 8 or 9 times or 10 or 15 times a day. List what you needed. Maybe you didn't get it, but what did you need to know to understand race and racism as you grew up, so that you would be more complete, more informed, more aware? Another question. What socialization strategies shaped your current interactions around race? How will you socialize so that you don't hear what I hear? How is it that we're talking about different things? When I'm talking about racism, you're talking about terrorism. You're talking about Ku Klux Klan. And I don't think you're a Ku Klux Klan person, no. But I do think you have access that I don't have. I do think you have safety that I don't have. I do think you can get resources that I can't garner. And finally, what are some next steps that we can take so that we can hear what each other hears, that we cannot be silent to keep the system in place, that we can honor the life that God has given to each one of us and the care of our planet for all. Do you hear what I hear? Do you hear the call, the energy calling us, drawing us to one another, that we might be made whole? Do you hear what I hear?
Sister Addie, on behalf of CTU, Center for the Study of Religious Life, and the National Black Sisters Conference, we thank you for your wisdom and your challenge in your presentation this evening. And we would like to emphasize that we hope that people will stay and participate in the breakout sessions. There are lots of members from the National Black Sisters Conference who are on the Zoom call who will also be participating. So, but we thank you for your presentation to us this evening. Maria?
I echo also these thanks, and maybe our best thanks is to get into a conversation. I'm going to, just so that everyone can see it, we put the questions in the chat, but I'm also going to share it on a screen right here so that everyone can see this, to reflect on your own. And these are your questions for the small groups. And as we find, the groups will find their own way in the conversations, but your opportunity is to look at your own experience of race and racism. What do you need to know to understand race and racism in a more complete way? Jot some notes for yourself. And to Sister Addie's profound questions throughout the presentation, What socialization strategies shape your current interactions around race? And third, what are some steps you can take to re-socialize or update your socialization around race and racism? We have time now, about 25 minutes, that Sister Gail will moderate the session, and Sister Anita and Sister Josita will also be looking at the questions to have a conversation with Sister Addie about what you might have some questions. We would ask you to put it in the chat. We have too many people to try to find individuals. I apologize for that. And thank you for any of your comments, your questions. What would you want to engage with Addie? We're blessed. We're blessed to be with her. So, Sister Gail, I'll leave you and Sister Addie, and we might need a moment to just to think of our questions and then to put them in the chat. Thank you.
Yes, Sister Addie, I'd really like to thank you for, again, for your presentation. And, you know, I'm sure that people have some things that they'd like to ask you about or talk to you about. So I'm just waiting for them to populate in the chat. So if you have anything you wanted to add until that happens, go right ahead.
Sister Addie, this is Anita. There is one question here. They would like for you to expand on the challenge for white people to try to understand themselves better.
Thank you, Anita. I would challenge white people really to understand. You can read White Fragility. You can start there because it talks about like the assumptions white people make as they're growing up, and like all the teachers are going to look like you, and all the stories will be about you, and that you won't have any trouble having access to any of the resources that your town or city or church provides, you know. And so learning about that, because right now it's like it's just quote unquote normal, right? Everything, you're the normal. So you didn't have to worry when you went to school or to college or to the store or to the airport. You never had to second guess yourself or to prepare for an unsafe situation or some. So you made assumptions about that. But there's information about socialization. I have a friend who's writing a book, and it's coming out in this next, maybe by summer. Mary Hess, I don't know if you know her, Mary Hess and Stephen Brookfield. They're writing a book on what it means to be white and how they came to know, because white, just like race, white is a social construct as well, because no one is white, right? No one is really white, but how do we get that? So also reading something about the history of race and racism. There's several books about that, and the history of white people. There's also a book about that. So understanding it, it's the fact that I'm saying we, I'm thinking about my sisters in my order, we don't know something about white people, right? We don't even know, we don't even deal with that category. We deal with African Americans, and we have things that we do and study and history and those kinds of things. But this actually more and more is coming out to help us understand how the system has been structured, how the system has been built to privilege white people. And at one time, you know, Irish were not considered white. And at one time, Italians were not considered white. And Jews were certainly not white, right? And so now that, you know, so you just need more information and more awareness of how that has evolved. And that's part of what I'm in, the invitation is to begin to find out, read more broadly. You can go to the internet and actually Robin DiAngelo has some video clips that are very succinct, and that short video clips about this concept of white fragility, and that meaning, why is it so difficult for white people to have these conversations? Because white people think they are objective, and they think they are normal, and they think they are strong individuals. Actually, we're all connected, but that's not the way they were socialized. And so I think this pattern of socialization and lack of awareness, you can learn about it. So I would invite you to do that. And if you want to get in contact with me, I probably can provide you with a bibliography of more resources to study that particular topic. But it's out there, and praise God for those people who are writing and who are doing videos to provide us with that.
Yes, Sister Addie, that was one of the questions that came up also, was, is there a list of resource list for those kinds of materials? Well, you know, there was also a question on approach. If you feel that those whom you want to speak to about racism would be angry or in denial about racism, would it be okay to begin on the subject of biases, to get them on board about how we all have biases, then move to the difference between racism and systemic racism?
Well, as they say, the tapestry, any thread is fine. You pull a thread and it's going to be connected to all the other threads, right? So if you're going to talk about bias, you have to talk about prejudice. If you're going to talk about prejudice, you have to talk about privilege. If you're going to talk about privilege, then you're going to have to talk about white supremacy. If you're going to talk about white supremacy, you're going to have to talk about racism. See, so that's the soup that if you start swimming in it, you're going to get all of those words, right? And the fear in general of white people is the fear of pain and rejection. And usually with my class, I say, okay, all the white people, I want to tell you right now, I am giving you the seal of approval. You are nice. You are all nice people. You're all good people. We're not talking about that. Because all people have biases, right? That's but by virtue of the fact we're socialized, you know, where we are and grew up where we are. So you have bias. All people have prejudice, right? So what happens? What happens is that when prejudice gets power behind it and authority and institutions to exclude somebody I don't like, or somebody that we don't want to speak, or like suppressing the vote. And we could say, or not allowing women to vote. Those are isms that deny somebody access. And so if you're going to get, however you begin the conversation is to begin the conversation. What I find helpful is storytelling. When we begin to tell our stories, it begins to unfold. And people begin to tell me, or I tell them, about me walking to downtown to get the newspaper on Sunday with my grandfather, because he would not let us ride the bus. I never knew that till I was old. But we thought it was an adventure. But you see what he made it into? He made it into an adventure because he was not letting his grandkids ride that bus and have those experiences where we were forced to sit in the back of the bus. I never sat in the back of the bus because we walked 7 miles to downtown, and we had got an ice cream cone, and we played games, but it began with a story. And they said, well, why would you have to sit in the back of the bus? And so the story begins. And once we begin the story, we realize our lives are connected. Our lives are connected. And to correct some of that, we have to get into the story. We have to get into the story. And so I generally tell people nice is not really in the Bible, so don't worry about being nice. Worry about being kind and compassionate and restoring right relationships, right? God is God. We're God's children, God's people, and we need to love everything that God loves. And that's us and all creation. So.
Sister Addie, could you give us an example of microaggression and in order to expand our awareness?
Okay, I usually don't use that terminology, but I think that's a contemporary way to say racist so that people aren't racist parlance, so that people aren't upset. Microaggressions kind of happen when you, I'll give you one. Oh, you are so articulate. That's a microaggression. Or you are such a great example of your race, right? You're a great example. How did they let you into Boston College? It must be because you're Black. They must be doing equal opportunity, and they needed a Black one, so they chose you. Oh, that's nice. So it's these little subtle statements that there's a nice little book called Microaggressions in Everyday Life. This is by Daryl Sue. And so, because microaggressions could be against women, against gender, against ableism, but they're slights that we make, subtleties that kind of get you. Without a larger time, and that kind of, but very often it's about Black people or cultural groups. I'll say this is somebody at my school said to one of the students, well, you're Vietnamese. Usually Vietnamese are smart. I'm thinking, really? Usually Vietnamese are smart? I mean, what? The guy comes in to ask a question. So they said, really? Usually Vietnamese are smart. So you see, that's kind of a microaggression. Really, it cuts to the core. And rather than really respond to the question the student came to ask, they said that.
Sister Addie, there's another question. Why is it that the subject of racism causes our white sisters and brothers to feel uncomfortable? Could it be that they may have to physically let go of being white? The sin of racism is theirs, not Black people. Can you respond to that?
I can, thank you. Thank you for the question, whoever asked the question. In general, racism is not a Black person or a people of color's problem. It isn't. The burden of it, the victimization is ours. We are victimized, and we have to develop strategies and coping skills and mechanisms and ways to not let it rest and to really work for the good of people of color and work for access. Those things we do need to do, but dismantling racism, that is a white people's problem. An issue to confront. And in general, the reason it is because the system privileges white people, right? And when you give up the privilege and you give access to everybody, then it kind of opens the door more broadly. And the reason that it's uncomfortable, because we have settled on, this is our comfort zone. this is normal. This is, I don't have to ask any question. I just, go along my life with no problems. I have access, power, and privilege. And it's like entitlement. I have entitlement. I'm entitled to these things in our society because I am white. And so when you start talking about racism with white people, the reason it feels uncomfortable is because we think it's an individual. You are saying I am bad, and I am individually made bad because of racism, when we're not really saying that. However, but because you benefit from the privileges and access and safety, like policing. I really make sure I don't drive fast in San Antonio because I do not want to be stopped by the police at all, or in any city in America. I don't want to be stopped by the police. And one time I was stopped by the police and I wouldn't give them my my driver's license. But the issue is, it makes you feel uncomfortable because you don't know the territory. You don't know what it will change, and you don't know. So you're uncomfortable because you feel vulnerable and fragile. Maybe I'm bad. Maybe I'm, so if we can begin to get past that, and that's why I say some education will help you understand the dynamic and give you more power of your own space and person to begin to engage others around the topic of racism. Because even if you're talking about racism with other white people, it can feel uncomfortable as well. But it's beginning the conversations. Let's begin. Let's not let fear inhibit us from doing the next right thing, the next good thing, by having a conversation that calls for my own transformation that will help the transformation of the world. So.
Yeah, this question is almost similar to what you answered. And so really it's talking about, rather than to speak about racism, wouldn't it be better to begin to talk about the subject of biases, to get them on board about how we have biases, then move to the difference between a racist and systematic racism?
I say begin. Wherever you can begin, begin. But don't stop. That's the thing. Racism is not going to be stopped and finished by one action and one time thing. This is a lifetime commitment because it's about right relationship with myself, right relationship with all other humans. There's a wonderful word, an African word, a Bantu word, Sawubona, S-A-W, U-B-O-N-A, I see you. I see you. And not only I, but everything with me, my whole history, I see you. I accept you. I respect you. I see you. When I really see you, I see your whole history. I see your ancestors. I see your family. I see all your relatives. I see your whole tribe. I see you. And then the second statement is, how must I be so you can be free? Sawubona, sawubona. How must I be so you can be free? And then our oneness, Ubuntu, our oneness in God, our oneness in Christ is able to happen. If I can say, Sawubona, I see you. I value you. I care for you. Your destiny is caught up with mine and mine with yours, because we will return to God together, only together. Sawubona. Sawubona, I see you. And part of the difficulty, the difficulty of Dives and Lazarus, the rich man and Lazarus at the door, the sin was not, the sin was that he didn't see him. That's the sin, he didn't see him. He walked past him every day, he didn't see him. That's the sin. Because we are one race, there's only one race really. We are one race, right? And we stop seeing one another as brothers and sisters in God. We're created in the image and likeness of God, and you refuse to see me, or I refuse to see you. That's the sin. So Sawubona, I would say begin there. Start seeing each other, start valuing each other, start valuing yourself. Start valuing yourself.
You know, Sister Addie, you answered the question that I was going to ask, and that is about how people of color become invisible. To be on an airplane and everyone gets handed a pack of pretzels but you consistently. Or, just all kinds of situations where I had a situation where I sat next to this priest at a conference for 8 hours. And after the conference, we laughed, we talked, all kinds of things. After the conference, I went to the grocery store and there he was. And I said, "Oh, hi," and he just stared blankly. He had no clue who I was. And, and that's the thing, he did not see me. He only saw me in one context. But once I left, I was just any other Black person on the street.
Addie, I know we're almost out of time, but this is one you may want to address. And it says, it seems as though resources, locations, education is really about one's economic bracket and not color. Can you speak to that issue?
I would be glad to, thank you. It's actually not true that some of us who negotiate the system well, so that you have some wealthy Black people, but when they don't know that you are a wealthy Black person and you're wearing blue jeans and a hoodie and you're in the grocery store and your name is Henry Louis Gates, you can get arrested. Or nobody asked me if I'm a school sister of Notre Dame with a whole bunch of school sisters behind me when I'm in the Berkshires at one of the curio shops, and they follow me around the store and ask me what I'm doing there. I said, well, I just toured the grounds and I'm staying here, I'm on vacation. And they didn't ask me how much money I had. They didn't believe me and kept following me around the store, so I left eventually. They didn't ask me when I went to a conference in Oklahoma at Oklahoma University, and my roommate was a white woman. When we got to the desk, there was a scurry and a flurry, and I didn't know what, they said, oh, your room is not ready. But what happened was they moved me to a room with a Black person. I didn't know that person. I mean, I was okay, but they moved me to a room with a Black person. And the white person I came with, I said, well, where were you? She said, I was in a room by myself. They didn't ask us if we had money. They didn't, so I did not have access to the room I had registered for. And I had money. When I was a research chemist, I went to get an apartment because I moved to a new city because I was doing research in that city. And at that stage in life, I had plenty of money. I had more money than sense. Okay, I went there. I called on the phone and they said, oh yes, we have plenty of apartments ready. So I said, I will be by this afternoon. So I went by the afternoon And guess what? There were no more apartments available.
When they saw
I
you.
had just called in the morning.
Mhm.
And so I'm just saying access to facilities is not just about economics. I had money in all of the situations that I mentioned to you today. I had money, but I could not speak for myself. I could not have access to the resources that I had gone there to get. And so it's not just about money. There are policies and there are practices and customs in cities. There's in San Antonio, we have what we call redlining, that certain districts are where Black people can buy a house and Hispanics can buy a house. And so we're one of the most segregated cities, kind of like Boston, segregated cities in the US. Because of that, they won't let you buy certain things in that district. And then the last example I will give, my niece was in high school, and I asked her, graduating from high school not too long ago, and I asked her if she had applied for the SAT and for the various tests so she could go to college. And she says, well, I went to the counselor and they said I didn't need to apply for that, to take that test. I said, well, why did they tell you that? They said, well, I live in whatever the zip code was. I said, what? They said, that probably you're not gonna go to college, and if you go, you probably won't pass that. So she says, I guess I'm not going. They told me to be a beautician. I said, excuse me. So I called my older sister and I said, get over to Reagan High School and you tell the counselor, blah, blah, blah. So my sister went that day to the high school because they had those children from that zip code. They did not register them to apply for the college prep courses or to go to college. And so it's that's a practice, and if not a policy, that happens in many cities and not just this one. So those kinds of things are in place. We may not know about them, but they are in place.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Sister Addie, we thank you so much for your input this evening. And you have given us a lot to think about and a lot to pray about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to add my thanks to you, my sister Addie Lorraine Walker. You just, I'm reverberating with this line, with many of your lines, but one of them that was you just put out there. It's like, you know, can we do what we need to together to dismantle racism, to break the system? It will take all of us. And then you said, we must, while there is still time. January 6th told us we don't have all the time in the world. Thank you for that. And you're right. I don't see what you see, and therefore I thank you for helping me see a little better. Like, I don't see always the learning to negotiate white spaces to be acceptable to whites. And then you said, and not killed. I felt like your words as well as your eyes spoke volumes. Like the pain, righteous anger, and the kindness to all of us gathered to say we need to do this together, and you invite us to Sawubona. You know, that's Jesus's invitation. That's, you know, the image that's calling us all. And I thank you for your kindness to give time and wisdom in your presence to us. And I pray that this will, as you're calling us to, galvanize, move us to action. And I invite you, all of you here, when the lake comes, watch the session, invite some friends with you, have these conversations. Our comfort is not the point of this. That's not the point of the gospel. Jesus
Right.
says it loud and clear, and we're in Lent. So because we're people, different of us know Good Friday in different ways, but we're people also of the resurrection, but we're called to work towards that. And this is the invitation. It's the invitation right now that's so loud and clear as you keep offering us these examples. And so I invite us to, really ponder what you've been hearing. There's so much, you can't take it all in. I watched last week's 3 times, and I think I'm going to do that again. It's a good trinity for this session. And then I invite you, next week is actually going to be our little community of planning committee of Sister Josita, Anita, and Gail, and myself to have a conversation, and then to invite you to the same conversation about how will you demonstrate an understanding of what's been shared? What have we learned? And how can our congregations take ownership in nurturing, supporting, and fostering an environment where people of color can thrive in religious life? So please, come back, engage with us, because it's so clear we can only do this together. Pope Francis keeps reminding us of that as well, but Jesus keeps reminding us, and the ways that are of the truth and the life speak to that. I want to also tonight again ask thank our technology and communications team of Letitia Akins and Colleen Urbaniak and Rick Monty for putting all this together, for sending the notes, for keeping us on, getting us into small groups, getting the music. And so all of this. And I want to thank each of you who came to this and who were able to stay for the small groups. Thank you for participating in this together. Your presence, time, sharing, even the blocks of silence in our gatherings are sacred, because they remind us how much is trying to reverberate through all of us. It's part of our commitment to one another, to the life, to make sure that we are doing all that we can to repair, dismantle, destroy, recreate, rebuild, find our way forward. And as Addie so beautifully kept reminding us, it's got to be together. So thank you for coming together across the oceans, across this land, across our congregations and different life commitments. We're blessed to be together, and may we live this blessing. So until we see one another next week, be well, be safe, be bold, be faithful, be willing to go to those holy, sacred spaces calling us. It's the Spirit's work. Amen. And I thank the IT folks unmute us all so we can all say thank you to Addie, to Gail,
Thanks, Addie.
and to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody.